Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Catechumens Depart. That was Maggie. This is Annie. I'm Eric Anderson.
I'm Father Mark Kozak from the Assumption of the Holy Virgin Mary Church in South Philadelphia.
South. Welcome back again, guys. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to continue our rambly ramble through history. We kind of suggested we might go to Russia this week at the end of the last episode, but given that it's going to be the 4th of July, I don't know. The days kind of run together in this whole quarantine business. What day is it, Father Mark?
Today is the 1st of July.
Oh, okay. So
wow.
Wow.
And what's even wower is I knew that.
I know.
Which is like, whoa.
That is pretty good.
Yeah.
So in 4 days, it will be the 4th of July. All external markers that we have notwithstanding. So we're going to go to America a little bit today. We'll start, Father Mark will tell us a little bit about the American Revolution, kind of the underpinnings of the country. We talked a lot about Protestantism a few episodes back. You'll sort of be able to see some of that play out in the founding of our country. And then we'll kind of take a quick jaunt through religious developments over the last couple hundred years. So talk fast, Father Mark.
Here we go.
Tell us about, what were people up to when they came over here? What was their deal?
Well, many of their deals were religious dissidents from the United Kingdom, what became the United Kingdom, from Scotland and Wales and England. And many of them would stop by in Holland and spend a certain chunk of time there because Holland was one of the biggest, the Dutch were one of the biggest trading partners of everybody at that time. And they would come to America. One of the places that you know about, it's called Jamestown in Virginia, founded in 1607. Was not founded for religious reasons. That was founded for financial reasons.
Like a trading outpost, or?
They wanted a trading outpost. They saw that there were American natives there, and they wanted gold. And for some reason, they were looking for gold in the middle of Tidewater, Virginia. This was not a big place for gold. But they found another type of gold there a few years later. A man named Rolfe, who, for those of you that know a little bit about Virginia history, married a rather important figure. Her name was Pocahontas. He came up with a special variety of tobacco.
Oh, no kidding.
And it was able to be grown in Virginia, and it became basically the currency of that part of what became America.
I remember that from long back ago in my history lessons. Okay.
So that was the first English settlement. Now you must realize that there were other settlements before this. St. Augustine in Florida is the oldest city in America. Obviously not founded by the English, they're founded by the Spanish, and Santa Fe, New Mexico, and so on. The Spanish held lands, of course, were under Spain, directly under the King of Spain and his folks. And they were Roman Catholics, and they set up missions along various trails that would go out, and they would follow the explorers.
Oh, nice. Father Mark, sorry. Will you fix your mic? It kind of...
Did I flip?
You flipped. You promised not to flail around this time.
There we go.
Okay.
So we found the famous royal
again.
In California is one of the best known of these. It's the Royal Trail. It's the one that stretches from San Diego all the way up into the upper reaches of Northern California, and there's a mission about every day's journey there. But on the East Coast, which is many of us think that all life begins on the East Coast, remains on the East Coast. It's connected to the East Coast. People felt that way in the 1600s too.
Okay.
So
they didn't have airplanes, so they couldn't call them flyover states. But
there were no flyover states. There were weird maps that had like states that stretched all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Very interesting things that what states claim to be, and so on. But we're
way digressing.
We're way digressing on this. But two important dates.
Okay.
One, 1619.
Yep.
First African American slaves came to the colony of Jamestown.
Brought by the English?
Brought by the English in connection with Portuguese and a few other folks.
Okay.
Yeah. And in 1620, the Mayflower expedition landed in what's now Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
And they were made up of Puritans who were radical Protestants who had their own particular way of life. And they set up their utopia, in a sense, there in Massachusetts.
Oh, utopias always go well.
Oh, yes. It did not work out very well for a number of people. People that were had different opinions than the Puritan leaders. People that had different religious opinions than the Puritan leaders. Women in general. So
kind of what was their deal? What was their belief? I mean, I know I have a sort of cartoon version of Puritans, as many people probably do in my head. But like, what was their? I know they were like very, very stringent and strict, and I mean, that type of thing. But
they were strict socially. They were strict politically. They were, sole scripture. They basically met in a meeting house. They wouldn't even call it a church. It was stripped of any adornment. In fact, it was all white, painted white.
Oh.
And you basically towed the line.
Okay.
And what the minister said was what the line was. And if you didn't do that, you were either killed or you were exiled.
Lovely. Were they still Trinitarian? I mean, are they still?
No.
Okay.
No, they sort of left. They left the idea of that, not in the Netherlands, but probably in England itself.
So would they even be considered a Christian subsect?
They are in a historical sense.
Okay.
So you can say the Puritans were Christians at that particular time.
Okay.
Their direct descendants are Universalists today. Unitarian Universalists who have interesting theological problems, especially with the Trinity and who Jesus is. But we could talk about that in the near future, about having a determination of what that's all about.
Okay.
Because that's really what much of the religious fabric of America is about. Who is Jesus? Who is the Holy Trinity? How do we worship? And so on. So the Puritans had no real worship per se. Their liturgy was very truncated. And they were under the political support of some folks in England until the Glorious Revolution of 1688, when Charles II was returned to the throne, and the Puritans were thrown out of political power.
Okay.
So,
now, were they the primary religious constituency or group or whatever here in America? Or
they were a little piece of what happened. So 1620, Mayflower comes over with Puritans. The first dissidents were exiled to a place called the Rhode Island and Providence Plantations.
Sounds pleasant. I hear it's chilly up there.
And they became the first religious dissidents in America, but their way of believing in freedom of religion provided the initial seeds for what we believe today in our Constitution. So it wasn't the Puritans, it wasn't Church of England, that showed up in Jamestown and in other places where the English colonized. It wasn't in Maryland, where the Catholics colonized first in 1632. It wasn't in Pennsylvania. Sorry, I know we're sitting here. I know William Penn was here. Sorry. The Quakers were pretty close. They were pretty tolerant. But the seeds of freedom of religion were started in Rhode Island.
By these people, the Puritans exiled.
Puritans had exiled them. Had they basically?
Okay.
Yeah.
Did they have a name, that group, or?
They probably did, and I don't remember who they were now.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Oh, I finally won a Stump the Priest question.
You did.
Okay.
So in between Massachusetts and Pennsylvania were the Dutch. And you're going like, what are you talking about, the Dutch? The Dutch too. Well, the Dutch had a colony here in America. The head of the colony, the biggest city in the colony, was called New Amsterdam. You also know it today as New York City.
I've been there once or twice.
And the land that we are on today, sitting here right now in almost center city, Philadelphia, belonged to the Dutch. Did not belong to the English at first.
Oh.
But a deal was made with the English and Dutch, and this became New York, named after the Duke of York. And New Jersey became was also a part of the Dutch lands that was handed over. So this all became part of British America.
Okay.
Colonized by Britons that came over to make money. Some of them still came over, like the Quakers and other dissident groups for freedom, for a type of freedom of religion. But economic reasons were important. So these became the British colonies as we know them. A better way of looking at them is looking at those in the north, looking at those in the center or the middle Atlantic states, and looking at those in the south, because they each politically had a different way of looking at things, and religiously they had a different way of looking at things. So it wasn't a clear cut, everybody's a dissident, and we all believed in freedom of religion, and we all love each other. That's not how it worked here. In the South was basically Church of England, very conservative.
Yeah.
Virginia was the most successful of the southern colonies. In the middle states were Maryland and Pennsylvania and Delaware and not states, colonies, Delaware and New Jersey. And then the northern were New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. There was no Maine. There was no Wisconsin. There was no Wisconsin. Yeah, really, it wasn't that either. There was no New Hampshire yet. There was no Vermont yet.
Oh, Kim is sad.
So they did not exist. They were part of Massachusetts. So.
Kim just said Vermont is the 13th state. The producer had a little growing up experience there.
But Vermont was also a country at one time, too, briefly.
Really?
Yes, it was. But that's another piece of history.
That's a whole nother.
So that's how it's set up, basically, to the Revolution.
Okay.
So
they've got a bunch of economic interests, a bunch of sort of like different strains of Christianity jammed next up to each other because of the countries that they came from. But I mean, at that point, there wasn't really any idea of a church and state separation, right? Or was that?
There was a little tree growing in Rhode Island. There was a little teeny mention of it in the Virginia Bill of Rights.
But I mean, like back in Europe, right? That was just, it's like
In
you
Europe,
came from Holland, you were
Dutch Reformed.
right? You came from whatever, So you basically had all these. Well, they were colonizers, right? But they were all jammed up next to each other because they brought their state church with them. So to
They
speak.
brought their state church with them, except here they were colonies. They weren't states.
Right. So
they weren't really organized in that political way.
Yeah.
Some of them were Commonwealths, and were directly connected to a specific family, like the Penns and the Calverts in Pennsylvania and Maryland. Some of them were commonwealths that were ruled by a oligarchy, like the Commonwealth of Virginia, ruled by the House of Burgesses. Each had its own particular political character to it.
But the religious situation was novel.
The religious situation was novel because you had a lot of religions mixing up.
So then you had to kind of like figure out how to get all these people to sit next to each other and not kill each other, or
or try to convert each other, or shoot each other, or and
not necessarily in that order.
Not necessarily in that order.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So then we decided we just don't want to be English anymore.
So we don't want to be English anymore for various reasons, and most people learned that hopefully in some kind of grade school. I hope you did. Please, God, someone taught you something about the American Revolution. Anyway, after the American Revolution, we had the article. We functioned under the Articles of the Confederation. We didn't really have a president.
Right.
We didn't have. We had a loose group of colonies that were together, 13 of them, and then in 1788, a constitutional convention was called right down the street that way.
Yeah.
A few blocks down the street, and they sat together for about a year and hammered out the Constitution of the United States of America.
I have visited that place a couple times now. It's pretty cool.
One of which articles had to do with the freedom of religion and not having state religion.
Which was like a totally new deal.
Which was like, yeah, no one really did this.
Yeah.
People had talked about this, but no one had really done this.
Like, had that ever existed ever in the history of humans?
Yeah. The Roman Empire tried.
Yeah.
But for the Roman Empire, the emperor was God. The emperor became God. But they had the pantheon where they put, if we liked you, and politically especially if we loved you, we would put your God in the pantheon along with the other gods.
Yeah.
So they were all equal anyway, or all the same, or whatever else.
Yeah.
That's where we get that idea from, by the way.
But the idea that you could have a religion specifically divorced from
the state
and the governance structure is not something that really had happened before.
No. And it was a it continues to be a very long road on how this works. Because many of us can understand that we don't have a state religion in America. But many Americans don't understand what freedom of religion is in America. And
what do you mean by that?
Two, that's a big whopping can there.
That's here. There's the can opener.
Okay, freedom of religion, and is according to the Constitution, is that you can believe what you want to believe as long as it doesn't hurt the group. Doesn't
the group meaning the nation, the country.
The nation.
Yeah. Okay.
So you can believe nothing, or you can have a very complicated and involved religious faith that you believe in.
Byzantine, so to speak.
You can be a Byzantine person. You could be a Buddhist. You could be Muslim. You could be whatever. But your faith is not legally under the law higher than another faith. More important in the eyes of the state. The state is supposed to treat each religion, each faith group equally. When I was a chaplain in the United States Navy, there were 191 faith groups that were recognized by the Department of Defense. My job was to defend all those, to make sure that the people from those faiths could worship the way they wanted to.
How did you negotiate that as an Orthodox priest, right? Like, that's a hard tension to hold, I would think.
It could be a hard tension
Or,
at times.
depending on your personality, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I had to remember that my job was to be the chaplain of a command in the Navy. My life is being an Orthodox priest. So if somebody walked in my door and said, I want to be Orthodox, and I would grab them and sit in a chair and we'd talk about icons and everything else, and I had a few of those.
Awesome.
And I had about 10, 15 converts during my 20 years.
Nice.
Most of them came in, had no religious belief whatsoever. They were just confused, or they needed to talk to the chaplain or whoever. So these people, like the other ones that came in, were made in the image and likeness of God and are inherently equal under the law too here in America. And their beliefs are equal under the law too. So unless, of course, as I said, they would something that would hurt the greater country. So
okay,
that's how things are supposed to work.
That is theoretically how things are set up.
Theoretically, that's how the Constitution is supposed to work. That's not how it works.
How does it work?
Well,
or not work?
For a long period of time, we were termed a Protestant country.
Right.
Made up of major Protestant groups that held sway over certain parts of the nation. And unfortunately, the Civil War broke a lot of that up because you had Southern Methodists and Northern Methodists and so on and so forth. Many churches were split, and brothers and sisters in Christ were split apart from each other due to the Civil War, which we still deal with today.
Yeah.
This was a major point where many other Protestant denominations came out of that particular conflict. Then, because this is America and we can believe whatever we want to believe, we would have groups of people that would come out and do that. And they would form their own particular type of faith, and some of them would be persecuted for them. Probably one of the most famous examples of that initially were the Mormons.
Mormons, yep.
So they were a small religious group that came out of New York and kept going west and west and west and being persecuted until they founded their own country of a Deseret out in what's now Utah, and they wanted their own country.
I didn't realize they formed
their own country. Yes.
Oh.
So, but the American government put pressure on them and basically said, that's not going to work out.
Okay.
So they became a state, and to this day, they're the majority in that specific state. Okay. We had all kinds of other interesting religious things happen. We had something that I can certainly talk about as most of me is a part of this. Different immigrations that came to the United States they came from different faith groups, and what happened to them in the first, second, and third generation. I'm a third generation Slav. For four of my great grandparents, and a second and a third generation Englishman, and two of my great grandparents. They came across here with different religions and different faiths, and they many of them lost their faith. Their faith was gone. It was swallowed up into what I call religious America.
Religious America.
And what happens to religion in America when it comes here. And why does this happen? And part of what happens is that we have developed our own civil religion in America that has replaced faith or pushed it aside and has become the dominant way that we feel about one another and that we feel about America. And we're about ready to celebrate one of the great feast days of that civil religion, the 4th of July.
Oh, well,
We have our own saints. We have our own holidays. We have our own everything, the way it was set up.
so I have an idea.
Okay.
We're at about half an hour.
All right.
So why don't we break there, and we'll leave the next part of that, talking about the civic religion of America, till the next episode.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
Cool. Happy 4th of July, everyone.
Happy 4th of July.
We'll be signing off with the dogs again. You'll get to say goodbye to them. Thanks for joining us, and as always, catechumens depart.